I got involved in politics in
Well,
college?
so I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, and maybe then kind of go quickly to that time. So how you got there, your politics, why you felt the way you did, because I don't think everybody had the same views. Just want to make sure this is going. Yes, it's going. So got your approval?
Well, probably the first involvement that I really remember vividly was the McCarthy hearings.
Yeah.
Because every day we would watch the McCarthy hearings. And of course my father was extremely liberal and was really against the McCarthy hearings,
Of course.
Obviously. And Roy Cohn, he was ruthless. You ought to watch the video about Roy Cohn's life.
Okay.
And he was Trump's lawyer too,
Oh God.
He groomed Trump on what to do. Denial,
That's right.
delay.
Yeah.
He was ruthless. And he went after gays,
I didn't know.
and he was gay, and he died of AIDS. But he went after gays ruthlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just a scum, Roy
He was
Cohn.
yeah.
So was McCarthy. And now they're talking about McCarthy like he's the one wonderful person. I just saw them on TV. The Republicans were. Oh yeah, they were going on and on. Oh, McCarthy knew what it was like, the deep state and all this stuff. Anyway, I can't do that. I'll go on and on.
Oh.
So, of course, Charlie and Tommy they had a lot of problems in school. I was very social. I was president of the dance club, and I was Future Nurses of America, and on the board for the school. We had separate, we called them houses, like 4 different sets, and you'd have a different board for each one. Anyway, I was very, very social.
So this was college?
High school. That was
high school. Okay.
So then I went to, when I graduated from high school, my parents wanted me to go to California because they weren't thrilled with my boyfriend Chet, who lived across the street, who I was engaged to. Mm-hmm. So they thought that would be a way for them.
Why were they not thrilled with Chet?
Well, actually, Chet was very smart, but he ended up being the chief of the fire department, and he saved a lot of children. There was all kinds of things in the paper. But they felt I was too young, and that he wasn't promoting education as much as they would want, and so on. Okay. So anyway, it was wonderful. Uncle Frankie took me to California, and I worked in the Insomniac. I worked in the bookstore, and then I would collect the tickets they had flamingo dancing. And
the bookstore was
movies.
Called the Insomniac?
Insomniac.
Okay.
I still have the menu, and they had all these specialty coffee drinks before Starbucks.
Right.
And they would have flamingo dancing, and then different appetizers, and I would collect the tickets. But I did the bookstore during the day, and they used to stand around the women, the young women there. When's your uncle picking you up? He's so handsome.
Frank.
I go, oh yeah, he's my uncle. Leave him alone. He's got 4 kids.
He was very handsome.
He was really handsome.
All the social men are all very handsome.
So it was wonderful. So anyway, so I stayed in California about 6 months. Then I went up to Oregon because Mary was going to have Frankie, and so
Uncle Donald's married.
Uncle Don was married, and she had to stay in Oregon because of the insurance. So I was going to take the 2 kids with Uncle Donald on the train up to Spokane, which I did, and Uncle Donald fell asleep, and I had these 2 little tiny kids trying to finagle them.
Frankie and Gina?
Gina and Denise.
And Denise,
and
okay.
Frankie was being born.
He was due, yeah.
But wonderful experiences with Mary and Donald too. In Spokane, Washington. Then we went to Montana. Hobart Hall. Her father was wonderful.
Hobart.
He took me to the Indian reservation.
Wasn't he really good friends with your mom?
Oh yeah, it was crazy.
Hobart and my mom.
She should have married him instead of Frank.
They seemed so happy.
Yeah. Oh, he was a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He came in and when she was in the hospital and threw his hat on the bed, and Frank was having a fit. They weren't married,
no.
She and Frank, but he was afraid.
Yeah,
he was
Frank
jealous.
was a bit of a, he was a bit of a.
So then I became a licensed practical. I had worked as a nurse's aide, then I became a licensed practical nurse, worked as a licensed practical nurse while I was going to college. Well, I went to the dorm, got my diploma, and then finished college, and that's where I met Bob. But the interesting thing
where were you going?
At the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut.
Okay.
But the interesting thing, I had to work full time. I had a Dean's List scholarship, but it wasn't a full scholarship. I still had to have I think it was a 4.0, 3.8 or a 4.0, which I had to keep.
Mhm.
But I was working full time and going to school full time.
It's exhausting.
And this one teacher came to me and said, "You can't do that. You're not allowed to work full time and go to school full time." And she had never worked a day in her life. She just got her PhD. Well, I was a little bit older, and I went for her jugular. I said, "Don't you ever tell me that I can't work. I have to pay the bills," because my father was sick. "I have to pay the bills at my house. So don't tell me I've got straight A's. Now, when my grades start going down, or I do something, and I was president of my class, I do something that doesn't meet with the goals of the school, then you can tell me that I can't work full time.
Yeah, it's
In
not,
the
it's your personal
meantime,
life.
you don't know what it's like to work. You never worked a day in your life because you came from a rich family. I didn't. I came from a poor family. So you leave me alone."
Yeah.
And one of the professors that was head of psychiatry said to me, "Good for you.
Yeah.
She can't do anything about it as long as you're keeping up your grades. She can't do anything."
That's a bit of a bully. She's being
Yeah,
a bully.
she was a bully. So, but anyway, the one thing that I, when I was in high school, I knew my father was brilliant, but he didn't realize as much in high school until I got into college, and all the college students would come to me and say, "Can I come over your house and hear your father recite poetry?" Because he had a voice like Richard Burton, the Irish, deep voice, and he would recite his poetry, and he'd talk about philosophy and religion and politics, and so I started getting like, wow, these are college students wanting to come over and talk. So my father, who worked nights, would stay up during the day to talk to these college students, was not good for his health.
Yeah. He had a bad heart to begin with.
Yeah. And he died of congestive heart failure.
And
so.
he would work to try and help the women in the factories, I was told.
Oh yeah, he did, and he'd do their job. He was the supervisor. He would do their job so they could sleep.
That's
yes,
what I was
he would
told.
do that all the time.
Yeah.
So that's where I really, and he used to do our signs. He was an artist, so he would paint our signs for us to do the protests for civil rights and against the war in Vietnam. Because remember,
Your father would do the signs?
Yes.
Our grandfather?
He would. I have pictures actually of Charlie holding the signs.
I'd like
Actually,
to
I have
see
one
those
of those
pictures.
movies here.
Yeah.
I'll put it.
Yeah.
And Charlie, when we went to W.E.B. Du Bois in San Francisco for the big national conference, and Charlie's there holding one of my father's signs, and we're walking around, and Gene, Gene still emails me, but we're all walking around against the war in Vietnam and for civil rights. And of course, I went on the March on Washington, Martin Luther King. I look back on it.
So what was that
Joan
like?
Baez was right next to me, and she was very young. She must have been in her 20s then, and she was playing her guitar.
kidding.
And she was just starting to be known, and everybody was kind of crowding around her. But she was very young, and I've seen her recently on TV, and I think, oh gosh, I didn't realize kind of how famous she was going to become.
Yeah.
But that was wonderful,
was
the March on
yeah.
Washington. And it was so impressive.
It's
and then,
such a new, it wasn't like, now, I mean, we went to the Women's March, Rick and I, right?
Yeah.
But that wasn't, something like that, it was the beginning of that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It was,
But we've got to do something with the Women's March. People need to be out there constantly for women's rights.
I know.
One of my friends left work, 3 to 11 shift. She left at 11:30. She got raped by a black guy and went into the ED, emergency department, to have a D&C so she would not get pregnant because she'd been raped.
Right.
They refused because Connecticut was the last state to allow any kind of birth control and abortions.
Wow.
It was a very Catholic
I
state
didn't know
at the
that.
time. I could not teach birth control. I said to the teacher, "What are you talking about?" Because again, I was a little bit older. "What are you talking about? I can't teach birth control to these women just had babies. I want to teach them not to have another husband.
Unless they want one.
Pregnancy, unless you want it." And she said, "Oh no, you're not allowed in Connecticut." So I went home to my mother and said, "Well, how do you use birth control?" She said, "I have to go to New York."
Wow.
Yeah, all the women had to go, and it's coming back. I'm
I
telling
know,
you.
it's very
They're
scary.
not going to be allowed to have birth control, no IVF.
It's very scary.
Women really need to be on the march.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
almost getting as bad as now Vietnam. The reason there were so many veterans that were there supporting our get out of Vietnam was because they were being drafted. Bob was in the Marines, John was in the Army, Tom was also in Vietnam. You know, so
Wait, which John was
Bob's brother was in
Okay.
the Army. Tom
Okay.
was in Vietnam at 18 years old.
which Tom? His brother,
His
other brother?
Tom. Now
So
he's
he
dying
had
of
three.
now
How
he's
is
got
that
a
possible?
kind of leukemia from the burn pit
Right.
because he was a career soldier. But anyway, so they were all
They allowed
drafted.
all three boys in the same family to
Well,
go to war.
otherwise you were drafted.
But
During our time, you were drafted. You either were in college or you had spurs like Trump had,
right.
and then you didn't go if you were rich enough. But otherwise, you got drafted. So
So-
then you would choose what service you wanted to go, the Marines, Army,
Right, I see.
or you were drafted into where they put you.
And told to go
So
wherever
Bob
they.
decided he wanted to do Marines, John wanted the Army, and same thing with Tom.
So Bob wanted to do the Marines. Isn't
I
that
don't
like
know
the
why,
most
because I
dangerous?
think being the oldest, he was on the marches on Vietnam with me
Of course.
against
Okay,
the war in
interesting.
Vietnam because he knew how
Interesting.
bad it was. No,
Okay.
so and Jean,
So what year was this?
this was in the early
The beginning.
60s.
The
yeah.
beginning of the war.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
When did you first become
Now you were
aware?
coming back, dead or maimed
Mm-hmm.
from the war in Vietnam, and that's why the men were like, "We're going over to Vietnam because we're drafted.
We have
so
no choice. Yeah.
We gotta fight this war."
I think
because
that's
it's
why
a
they've
bad
made the
war."
military, not, the draft isn't there, but they're essentially, it's its own caste of people in this country. And that's how I view it, right?
Yeah.
The military is a separate caste,
Right.
right? Now, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But when you met him, when you met Bob,
Right.
was the war just beginning? How old were you when you met Uncle Bob?
I was 21, I think.
Wow.
Well, I was the secretary of the Student League for Human Rights. Bob was vice president. Jean was president. And I was
I see.
engaged to Jean.
I remember.
And you know that whole
Yeah,
story.
I do.
How I,
So what was going on with the Vietnam War at the time when you guys met? And what year was that?
well, that was in the 60s. We got married in 1966.
Okay, so that was
So
like
we'd
the
already
height of
been
the war.
marching all along.
Before you got married and
Yeah.
everything. So
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Well,
So
we had started our marching way ahead of time when it was not popular at all.
no, of course not.
And we
yeah.
got in trouble with the school. They didn't want us to be able to have some of these speakers in there because they said that, they were communists or they were against the war in Vietnam and we're there fighting. And,
I see.
but because Gene was older, he'd been in the Navy, Bob was in the Marines, all these ones that were in our Student League for Human Rights realized how bad the war was.
Yeah.
So we were in there early protesting.
Okay.
And I remember one time we were in New York and they were throwing Molotov cocktails at us. And that's pretty darn scary.
Wow, yeah.
So
Yeah. It
now
was
the
a-
one time my father said no to me marching, the only time he ever said no. The Freedom Riders, I was going down with the Freedom Riders
Mhm.
for civil
Down
rights.
south.
Yes. And my father said no. He
Yeah.
said, I'm worried about what's happening. If you go down there as a white girl from
Mhm.
the north
Mhm.
and you're there fighting for civil rights, which he was supportive all along of me fighting
Mhm, of course.
and doing protests, but not down south. He
I know.
was very
People were
frightened. He
murdered.
wouldn't let me go.
People were murdered.
Thank God, because they blew up the buses.
Yeah. Wow.
And the three fellows, Cheney and
Yeah. They killed them.
Yeah, they killed them all, and so that was the only time he said, "I'm frightened for you going down to the."
Yeah. Well, he had a good intuition. He knew.
Oh yeah,
He knew.
yeah. But otherwise, he was supportive all along. That,
So.
and I'll just tell you this story. One time, I belonged to the NAACP. So one time, I was going to do voter registration. I did voter registration from college years all the way through till just a few years ago. I stopped it.
Okay.
So I took a picture of me when I was in college because that was in the front page of the
Mhm.
paper because I was in the ghetto.
Okay.
It's like this white girls in the ghetto
Okay.
doing voter registration. So Steve Gordon and myself were in this picture in the newspaper, and so the League of Women Voters said, do you have that picture? And I said, yes. And they said, we have a picture of you doing voter registration, and this little black guy, that high school kid, was signing for voter registration.
Oh, good.
And so they took a picture of me now, and I was in my 70s when
Yeah.
I was late 70s.
Did they find
then,
him?
Huh?
Did they find him?
They
No.
didn't find him, but it was a big school that we did all these voter registrations all around. So it
That's
was interesting.
fantastic. I like
But I
that.
have to tell you about the NAACP. I belonged to the NAACP. So one day I was driving the car, and somehow I went down I was going for some voter registration, and it was in an area that I didn't know. It was kind of a dangerous area, but I didn't know. And I was supposed to meet, I don't know if it was
I
Jean
grew up in
or-
all those areas.
Jean or one of those areas. And you didn't go by yourself as a white girl. You
Yeah,
didn't go.
Especially
you
back then.
Yeah, so you went with a fella. you
Yeah.
know. So I was supposed to meet him, and somehow I started going down this one-way street the wrong way. Didn't realize it was one way, so I got pulled over by the policeman, and it was a black policeman. And at that time, they didn't have a lot of black policemen.
Yeah.
So he said to me, "Well, I need to see your license. You're going down a one-way street the wrong way." And I'm apologizing all over the place. So at that time, when you would hand your license, you didn't take your license out. You showed your wallet.
I see.
And so I flipped open my wallet. On one side is my
You
license.
saw the NAACP.
Is NAACP.
Oh, that's great.
So I saw him look at the NAACP, look at me, and he said to me, "Well, I'll have you turned around and get you going in the right direction. I'm just giving you a warning.
That's
Be
great.
careful." And I thought,
Well, how
he
lucky
has
is that? How lucky,
let me off because he
Yeah.
saw that NAACP.
Well, not a lot of people were, there was a big pushback against that, back then. And even now, I think people stigmatize the NAACP as
Yeah,
like
well, at that
radical
time
left,
Yeah.
commie,
Yeah.
far left
Right.
type thing. Now,
Right.
and they still do. They
Yeah.
still do. So.
But I didn't even realize that my card was there. But then when I saw him look at it, I thought, "Oh, gee, that's why he let me off."
That's good. Yeah.
So that was interesting. He was a nice guy, really nice.
Yeah, the only guy actually that I went one way the wrong way was a black guy that pulled me over, a cop, and he's from New Bedford, so it wasn't that long ago. It was like only maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But he's like, "It's late. I was just getting off work."
Yeah.
He's like, "Go home. It's okay." He let me off.
Yeah.
I was so grateful because last thing I needed another moving
Right.
violation in my life.
The only time I got picked up within the last, decade or something, I don't think even that. I haven't been picked up by the police for speeding or anything in a long, long, long time. But I was driving down Route 1 here, going to the beach by myself, and there was a cop sitting in his car, no car in front of him. He was doing his paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
That he had probably arrested somebody for
Yeah,
speeding.
right.
He was doing his paperwork. And there was cars on the left-hand side. Well, you're supposed to get into the left-hand side if you see a cop.
Yeah.
But he was sitting in his car. He wasn't out of his car. And there was
Right.
no car in front of him.
Right.
So anyway, I couldn't get into the lane anyway. So he pulls me over.
Oh.
Don't you realize you could kill a policeman if don't pull over to the left-hand side of the road? Well,
You're
I
supposed
wasn't
to
gonna.
make a lane between them.
First of all, I was ready to argue with him and say, first of all, I couldn't get into the left-hand lane. Second of all, you were in your car doing your paperwork. There's no way, unless I purposely tried to hit your car, that I would have hit you. But I thought, don't just
argue.
keep your mouth shut. So I
Yeah.
said to him, look, I would never, ever hit a policeman. I work with policemen in the emergency room all the time. I'm a nurse. I said, I am so sorry that I didn't get into I didn't say, well, I couldn't get in because there was traffic.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And so then he calmed right down.
Okay,
I said
good,
I was a nurse and I would never.
Yeah.
I said because a close friend of mine was killed on this road, and she got out. She was a policewoman. She got out to help a car that was disabled, and a guy came behind and killed
No,
her.
I think it's good that they tell you to move over
Right,
one,
right.
because I've seen it dangerous too. It's so quick you could easily,
And now I've noticed the police are going to the other side of the car.
Okay.
They're not getting in the driver's side.
Right, that's
if they're
probably
if they're
smart,
on Route 1 or something, they're going on the other side. And that's smart because that's how she got killed.
Yeah.
She actually was behind, had finished helping the person who was behind
Yeah.
going to get into her car, and then she was hit.
Wow. Okay.
You know, and they it was all in the paper and everything. So.
I mean, yeah, when they first did it a couple times, when they first made the law in Massachusetts, you know, I didn't know about the law right away, you know?
Yeah.
But they gave you a chance. They were like, so the first time I got pulled over for that, and he explained that there's this new law. He's like, but you didn't know about it, and it is a new law, but from now on, you know? So they kind of let everybody get the first, like, year at the most in Massachusetts anyway.
Right.
But, so I wanted to ask you, what I want to know is how people felt about the Vietnam War at the time, your memory of like society as a whole, the different factions, the different viewpoints of the war, then, and then looking back now and how people think about it now with everything that's going on, the wars in Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And how you feel like how society, are we becoming inured to war, or what is going, how you viewed it back then and how you view it now retrospectively, and what you think of society back then and society now. I know that's a lot to ask, like trying to wrap your mind around.
I never really viewed, again, because I was older in college, I'd already had a lot of friends that had talked about the war in Vietnam, had been in the war and come over and then started going to college.
Okay.
So part of that Student League for Human Rights was a lot of the older guys were talking about. They were vets, and we talked about it all the time.
Okay.
And so I was educated by them. I was educated by my father because he read all the time. Constantly.
And Dad and Uncle Tommy, they were in college, so they didn't have to worry about the draft, right?
Yes, they were full scholarships and straight A students, so they didn't have to worry about it. But, so I was educated by our Student League for Human Rights. My father helped in educating me, because otherwise I wouldn't have known that much, because I was so involved with my studies for nursing and working full time. Mm-hmm. So really early in the Vietnam War. But if you talk about society, look at Born on the 4th of July. And that tells you a lot about the beginning of the war, how people were kind of brainwashed into, oh, well, we have to do our patriotic duty and fight communism and the whole bit. And of course, they'd been through this whole McCarthy era. And
when did the Gulf of Tonkin? So McCarthy was
in the 50s, yeah.
Right, and because my mom's girlfriend's mother and father were put in jail by McCarthy out in California.
Well, a lot of people committed suicide. They lost their jobs.
She was her first 4 or 5 years of her life. They didn't have parents because of
McCarthy.
Yeah, McCarthy. I know. So how long after the whole McCarthy thing, Vietnam happened, and what was it that, like, society, what woke them up? Was it the Gulf of Tonkin? How long until you found out that the Gulf of Tonkin was a lie?
Well, I think a lot of it was the vets coming back, telling how they were treated there in Vietnam. And you could see that even in that Born on the 4th of July. Yeah. That movie is fantastic. Yeah. And that tells you how he turned over from going from one extreme to the other, and he knew what it was like. And the vets were treated terribly. Yeah. Those that were disabled, they were treated terribly.
When they came back?
When they came back and when they were over there.
By the government?
Both ways, yes. And so, and then things started leaking out more and more in the press about how it was planned, and, you know, the involvement of the government in this, and how many young people. And the other thing was, you saw it on TV. That was the big thing. You saw the men being killed on TV. If it wasn't for the TV, I don't think the people would have been educated enough. Because not that many people were reading their history books about what had started this whole thing. So the TV made the difference, that the American people started seeing, oh my God, not only are my sons being drafted, but I'm watching everybody being killed, dying in the helicopters taking them off, and then you get some movies like Born on the 4th of July and so on. So all those contributed to the education, and I think seeing those vets coming back.
How many
Harry,
vets died?
when he came back and he got up there and told
the Senate,
all about,
Yeah. So what about, I remember watching that, but what about, like, how we got into the war, and do people feel betrayed? I mean, I know, like, Kennedy was murdered. I can't imagine, like, what that did to our society. There's a lot of trauma at that time in our society, right? And upheaval, right?
Yeah.
In the 60s, early 60s, all the way through, actually. All the way through the Vietnam War. I mean, it was, how long did it last? It was 10 years?
When you see somebody on TV talking about how wonderful McCarthy was,
I don't understand
this
that.
is scary.
I can't believe that.
This is scary. This is coming back. This was at one of the big conventions that Trump was at. They were going on and on how wonderful McCarthy was, and he knew that the deep state was like, and fighting communism. And I'm like, oh my God, we're going back to the 50s. We should have learned from this. And the politicians that were so crooked all along.
Like Roy.
Yeah, and
he wasn't a politician.
The
he was a
TVs
lawyer.
and the movies, all the president's men, all those types of things contributed to people being educated because they're not reading.
Yeah.
So they're going to see it on TV.
Yeah.
And, when you go through all the president's men, you can see how that's happened now too. All of those changes in the government. It's really frightening because when you start seeing all of those, what we thought were normal, for women to have all these rights are being taken away. The gays
the
are going to
Supreme
have.
Court is now,
Absolutely.
it's
ruthless.
It's banked against us deliberately.
Yeah.
I mean, even since, and not just women's rights, but Citizens United.
Yes.
How long ago
that
was that?
started
That
it.
was the beginning.
We went to Widener Law School, the League of Women Voters. We all went there way when Citizens United first came across, and the Supreme Court did that.
Yes.
We knew that this dark money was going to make the difference, and that's when it started happening.
I know, and I swear to God, I was protesting Citizens United before it passed, and then after, I don't know what to do. I feel like we have no voice. I mean, I think back in the 60s and the 70s, even people in America felt like they had a voice still.
Right.
I feel like we have no voice now.
Well, except if we can vote and not Trump getting away with lying like he does.
I know, he does.
And, he made almost double the amount of money that Biden did right after he got convicted of 34 counts. He made all this money. They're giving him $50 million here and all.
Well, that's because it's just corrupt. Our country has, because of Citizens United, it's become corrupt.
Yeah.
It's we knew that was going to be the case.
And the Supreme Court can get away with not have any ethics to worry about. They're lifetime guaranteed. Even the one doing the whole thing, you would think if somebody stole the top secrets, not only of our country, of other countries, and that's why the other countries don't trust us, because he stole those secrets, took them down to Mar-a-Lago, and he's getting away with that.
I know. But they're saying, well, Biden did it.
Yeah, but he told them come right away and check.
Yeah, and come and get very different from hiding it.
So did Pence.
Yeah.
He had him in his house too.
Yeah.
And so did Obama.
Yeah.
And that can be done by mistake. But he didn't do that by mistake.
Yeah, I know.
He purposely had those boxes set aside. Some of them were in his drawers.
That's very
in
manipulative.
His bedroom.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But the other countries are saying, we can't trust you with our secrets.
Yeah.
Our nuclear secrets.
What about, how do you feel like the media has changed in the view, like, okay, they don't talk about Vietnam that much anymore.
No,
but they don't.
No.
And I think that's, again, like you say, that people need to be educated and remember that these things happen. Your government lies to you.
Yeah.
The Gulf of Tonkin was a
lie,
lie, right?
That's why Rachel Maddow's podcast. Oh, but she's got it right down there. You've got to listen to those.
I know.
1 and 2, Ultra 1 and 2. She goes through that history. If people don't read the history, they won't know what's going on now.
Well, they don't even discuss it. They let alone
But
read it. Let alone read it. They don't even
Ultra
discuss
1
it.
and 2
And
is
if you
fantastic.
discuss it, and he has friends that are all ex-military, some work for Raytheon, up there, okay, and they're lovely men. And I love their wives.
He's not a Trumpster, is he? Oh, God.
Oh, my daughter is too.
Oh, you're going to have problems.
So, but he's not.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, because I don't think it could live with it, but he's kind of.
Okay,
So-
you gotta point out the things to him that Trump has
Yeah.
done.
But
First of all,
it's all you don't
trillions
have, no,
of-
but you don't, it's all lies on both sides, so.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
But you got the facts of how much he spent
I
in
don't
those
know,
4
but this
years.
is the talking points is that it's all lies, so we'll lie, and we'll say they lie, and then you don't have to believe anything.
Oh,
And then we
God.
can do whatever we want, cause it's divide and conquer,
Yeah,
right?
well,
And I
that's
think
true.
the media's complicit though,
Oh, they
partially
are,
in this,
absolutely,
you know.
absolutely.
But, so,
You've got the extreme. What I do is I watch all of the different ones: MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and I even watching it. I hate it. The News Nation,
ugh,
and I watch. I mean, I'm a news addict.
yeah, me too, me too.
Como. I watch him. Who else do I watch? But anyway, Ultra 1 and 2. You've got to listen to.
Okay.
Do it on your own.
Okay.
It's all that history that's back
will,
again.
I will.
Every single bit of it's come back.
So what I don't understand is this complacency in our society now, because people basically feel like we're being lied to left and right, right?
Yeah, and people
But
are
did
afraid.
they feel like they were being lied to during the Vietnam War?
No,
And
no, not in the beginning.
not
they
at the
didn't.
beginning, right?
Only
But then,
people that read a lot
Mhm.
and were in contact with people that came back from Vietnam, that vets had come back, and really history, because we did a lot in our Student League for Human Rights. We would spend time on history, going
Okay.
through the history. And so that was so important. I mean, I love history, so
Mhm. Yeah.
it's extremely
Well,
important.
because you
that-
need to understand the perspective, right?
Yeah,
You won't get the right
absolutely.
perspective if
Yeah.
you're just getting it from the local,
Yeah.
your news, you
Yeah,
know?
and whether you leave Rachel 1 and 2, the Ultra 1 and 2, all you have to do is start looking it up
Yeah, exactly.
in the books. And
Yeah,
of course, the
exactly.
books are going to be burned before too long,
Well, I
because
mean,
they're
this is-
certainly doing that.
Well, they're banning. They're banning.
They're going
right.
to be burned
Yeah,
before
yeah.
too long.
And
I'm
the
telling
thing
you,
is-
they're being banned now, but they will be burned.
What
It's
scares
so
me is
much
that
like
I
Nazism.
was mentioning his friends because I'll put up posts about what's happening in Ukraine. I'll put up posts, so with Russia, and Putin is a criminal, and Putin is a
Oh,
monster,
yeah.
an absolute
Trump
monster.
loves Putin.
No, this
And
is what I
he
tried to
loves
say to
North
Uncle
Korea.
Tommy.
North
North Korea, those
Oh,
strong
my
men
God,
love they're
yeah.
just dictators, is what they are.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, I'll put up that. I'll put up information about Israel and what they're doing in Gaza
Right.
and how atrocious it is. Now we're Quakers, and we open our New Bedford Quakers open the Ramallah school. It's still there. It's over 100 years old, and then we educate, and pay for the educations of young women and
Right.
everything there, right? And it's going through all that. But
That's
there's
like
more.
I have an organization. We give scholarships, and
Yeah.
I'm a sisterhood for that. Yeah.
So I'm the treasurer now
Yeah.
of the Quakers, which I didn't want to be, but they reeled me into it.
Oh, well, good. You're
Yeah.
doing good for young people
Yeah.
and children.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the thing about it is that I'll mention these things and Rick's friends will get mad. Why do you always have to be so political? You can't be political anymore, because then you're the asshole. So I said online at one point, I said, I'm sorry if I'm an ass for being political. You don't have to pay attention to my posts.
Mhm.
But the point is, that's a form of censorship.
Sure it is.
We are not supposed to talk about politics in this country, because
Right.
then you're the ass.
Right.
You're the jerk.
People are
that's
really
gonna-
frightened. If you see the techniques that Trump uses, he has even scared other countries. Germany just came out and said about Trump and how smart Biden was. Even though he's older, he has this wisdom that is tremendous. For 35 years of wisdom in history that he's lived. Whether you like him or not, or whether you think he's too old, the fact is Trump doesn't have any of that.
No, I was
Nothing.
thinking
He
about that.
doesn't
I
know
was
a
thinking.
thing.
No, I was
And
thinking
he's
about
so
that. There's truth
dangerous.
in that. That's truth. Absolutely.
And he has scared those countries from saying anything because he has said, revenge, I will retaliate. And they've
Absolutely.
seen what he's done to people. He just did that to the very conservative head of the Freedom Caucus, ultra conservative, Good, I think his name is, in Virginia.
Because he didn't support him.
Because he supported DeSantis for a while, and then he supported
He's
Trump.
very.
Trump went after him. He's showing everybody, I will go after you.
Yeah.
Revenge and retaliate. And
He's
he's
a
teaching
narcissist.
other countries
That's
that
what narcissists
don't say anything against me because I'm going after you as soon as I get elected.
Mhm.
And they're so afraid of him being elected that they're going to keep their mouths shut. And that's sad
Mm-hmm.
because they ought to all come out and say he's an asshole. Remember that picture of him when he was in Canada.
Yes.
When he went to the G7, I think it was a G8 or something. And the Chancellor of Germany, she's got her face at him like, you're an asshole. You know, how the hell did you get to be president of the United States? They're all standing around him like, what is this guy? You know?
I agree. I remember seeing
And
him force his way through,
right?
push these,
Remember,
pour these underlings
they
away.
need to show those pictures over and over.
But here's the
Do you
that's what
want
we
your
need to
kids to do this?
emulate this person. First of all these, as much as I want there to be multiple voices, and this is a free country, and you have every right to say and believe and speak whatever way that you see fit, because it's freedom, okay, the freedom principle.
Right.
As much as that is the case, it still seems to me that these people who believe in the rule of law, and they're often very military too, these Trump supporters.
And police.
Huge. Police, firemen, all huge Trump supporters.
All supportive.
And they're
of it.
union people.
Yes.
Too. They hate the union, but they're in a union.
Right.
And that's made their life better.
Right.
The irony of it, right?
I know.
However,
absolutely.
You're supposed to be law and order people, yet you're going to elect, and I'm not saying Biden isn't corrupt, because there is corruption. They're all corruption,
yeah.
but that doesn't mean you're going to pick between the lesser of two evils, to be honest, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm voting for Biden either. Okay, I might be voting libertarian. I might be voting Green Party.
Unfortunately, if you do, you're voting for Trump.
Well, this is what. Okay, this is
show
okay.
that you're
But I live
voting
in
for Trump if you
Massachusetts,
do.
which is a blue state, so we'll. But anyway, it's
I
kind of like a dissent vote, But at any rate, my point is, if these people are law and order, why are they trying to elect like this huge con artist criminal? Like, what do they see? I don't understand. And this is the thing, we had Nixon. Nixon was a criminal,
Right.
he was a Quaker,
Right.
but he was still a criminal.
He
He was a criminal.
Yeah.
Right. What is it
But
in the
he-
American
and the
psyche that
interesting
allows
thing-
us to have
Right.
these, like,
The interesting thing about Nixon was he didn't fight the law and order at the end. He knew they had him,
yeah.
and he didn't fight
No,
it.
he's
Trump will fight
Oh,
this.
yeah.
If he
He'll tear the country apart if
he
he
is going to
just
tear
do it.
the country
Absolutely.
apart
I agree.
because there is no way he's going to lose this time. He's
Yeah.
going to make sure that everything. You see what he does with the denial, delay.
Yeah.
I mean, our secrets.
Roy Cohen is the same.
Our
Yeah.
secrets. That judge is letting him get away with this, sitting on that, delaying everything so that we won't know what he stole. You know, there's a lot that he stole that because these other countries had to change all of their secrets because of him.
Yeah, their information.
Because they know he probably stole everything. I
So-
mean, they already showed some of the things that he stole, and it was frightening.
So, the Supreme Court recently basically is delaying the results.
On purpose.
But why? What is the...
Because they don't want the American people to see what he did on
But I don't
January
understand
6th.
but I understand that, but
Yeah.
why?
Because-
Why do they not want the truth to come out about how corrupt
Because-
this man is?
Because then they
Because
can get
then
away
they can
with
get away
doing.
with their corruption.
That's exactly right.
So what do we
Because
do about
Robert's
that?
wife is making
Oh yeah, I know.
millions of dollars, and he doesn't want that to come out. A lot of the stuff that his wife is doing.
I
So
see.
Robert's head of the court is letting that get away
So
with
what
it.
do we
And Thomas
do?
and Kavanaugh.
I know.
Now Barrett, she's made a couple of good decisions, so she might. I don't know that she's in the middle of the road at all, ever
No.
will be, but she
No,
at least
no.
made some couple of decisions. That,
But see, the thing is that the court is not supposed to be
yeah, but
like an evangelical court. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not supposed to be this idealism. It's supposed to be the law.
that's
not-
what was set up
not-
by our founders,
right,
but
so-
it's not working that way.
But I don't understand
And
why
Trump
we don't
gets
have.
in and he can put 2 more people
I
in.
know. This
So
is
then
the
there's
thing.
no chance, and he can also expand the court. And I'll tell you one thing Biden did.
So what
All
do we do?
along, from the beginning, I kept saying, you got to do something with that border. They're going to use it against you, and there should not be millions of people coming in this country. And, they found 8 ISIS people. There's a small amount of people that are coming in that are really going to be real dangerous. Most of the people are decent people, but there are a small amount that are murderers or that, but they're not rapists and murderers
No,
like Trump
compared
said.
to the
But yeah, the majority
compared
of
to the majority, they're just trying to have a
but
better
Biden
life.
from the beginning should have been doing something, even though he couldn't get let them, he knew that they were never going to vote for him to have any border security. He knew that from the beginning. So at least attempt the executive, even though the courts, he did attempt it once in the beginning and the courts threw it out to put, do the borders more strenuous. But he could lose because of those
Well, I
borders.
explained to the owner of my gym, I got into a big political conversation with the owner of Workout World, where I live, and he's a Trumpster. And I said, well, if the Republicans in Congress, which they have had control of Congress, if they
The money, that's the most important. They have control of the money.
It's the corporations that want us to have the immigrants here.
Sure.
Because they are the ones that benefit the most.
But
Okay?
we also benefit,
As a society,
because we don't have enough money. We are
don't have
only
enough
making
workers.
1.6 children.
I
We
know.
are not replacing
Oh,
ourselves.
I know.
And
I've
Social
had this
Security-
conversation with him as well.
Right, Social
Right?
Security,
I've had all
Medicare,
these
and
conversations, but what I
that's
said
all
to him
gonna
is
go.
if they really wanted to control the border, then why haven't they?
Well,
They've had plenty of opportunities. It's just smoke and mirrors,
Right,
buddy.
right.
They are not representing you. They're representing corporate interests.
Right.
That's
That's
it.
exactly
and all they're doing is using this as a wedge issue to divide us.
Right, but Biden knew that. He
Oh, yeah.
should have kept doing those executive orders, even though he knew the court threw it out each time. He did it in the beginning, they threw it out. And then he didn't do anything.
Yeah, I
He
know.
should have done it every time, even though he
I
knew
agree.
the court would throw
Throw
it
it
out.
out, but it's
he
a
could
political-
say, I did it in
tried,
year
and
such
I
and
tried.
such, I did it the next year, I did it the next year after that, to try to control the borders. I couldn't do it on my own.
Yeah.
Because it has to be the Congress that votes it in, and they refused to vote it in.
That's right. So basically
Right.
call their hand.
Right.
Call their
He
hand.
should have been doing that all along.
I
I
know.
do not understand why he didn't
I
do
don't
that
either.
politically.
I don't know.
He should have, even though he knew it couldn't be done actually in executive orders, because this executive order he just did now, it's going to be thrown out.
Yeah.
Even the
I
ACLU
know.
is throwing it out.
Yeah.
So, the
But
one
at
thing
least it's saying, hey, we want
yes,
we want
he should
this
have done
change.
that.
We want this change.
Whoever was advising him was wrong advising him
But
on
I
that.
don't think he's the right. So right now we've got 2 wars going on
Yes.
that we're funding. We may not
Well,
be
we're-
sending boots on
Right.
the ground, but we're funding those
Right.
wars, and people are dying.
But we
It
will
is-
be sending boots on the ground.
This is the
if
worry.
Ukraine loses, we're going to be sending boots on the
Yeah.
ground to Poland.
Yeah, this
Because
is the
that's
thing.
the next place Putin's going
That's-
after. It's just like Nazi Germany. He taking it little by little, take the property,
Yeah,
little by
no, he
little,
believes
they
it's
make,
his. He
yes,
believes it's
yes.
his, and he's
And that-
felt that way from the
but
beginning.
he
He was
feels-
just buying his
He
time.
feels all of those countries that left the USSR
Or his.
belong to him.
Mhm.
And he's going after every one of them. And so NATO, because we belong to NATO, we're all going to be involved in this. Boots will be
That's
on the
right.
ground.
So we don't have the draft like we had in Vietnam, right?
Right.
So
It doesn't
now,
mean
now,
Trump. It doesn't mean they can't put the draft back in.
right? That's true.
Absolutely.
But basically, most Americans, like I said, it's a separate caste, right? So most Americans, well, they made that choice. They're, they made the choice to be in the military and go off to war. So it's not my business, it's theirs. You know what I mean? It's a separate caste, and so therefore most Americans are not going to be fearing that their children are going to be going off to this next war, right?
But they will soon.
But they will,
Mhm.
and they're not recognizing that. But
They're
so
not
they don't want any part
They
of
don't
it.
believe it's going to happen.
They don't. I know a lot of Americans who feel we should not be in
And
Ukraine.
they don't believe there could be a nuclear war. I'm part of the Delaware Medical Reserve Corps, and we prepare for war because we as nurses have to respond
I see.
to help people if there's a war.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, the chances of us going to war, this is higher than we've ever had of nuclear war.
I'm very, yeah.
I mean, you see what Russia's doing, and then now they're in cahoots with North Korea.
And then you
Um,
have, I really do feel, even though I'm very much, obviously, against what's happening in Palestine,
Mhm.
but I do feel like Israel, Iran, not Israel, sorry, Iran,
Netanyahu,
Iran, China, Russia have been in cahoots to bring down the West.
Sure.
And they're working on it, right? They have
Yeah.
that whole, and Saudi Arabia as well. Saudi Arabia is playing two
Yeah.
sides against them, and so is China. But really and truly, because China, they have the economic interest with us.
Yeah.
But they're definitely, they don't want, unipolar, as they say, right? They don't want a unipolar world. They want the U.S. hegemony. They don't want that, right? So basically, that's been going on for a long time, and they got all their ducks in a row, and Putin basically was preparing for this. They've been preparing for this for decades.
Sure.
Is what I'm trying
Absolutely.
to say.
His whole
For
career.
decades. Yes.
From when the wall came down,
I agree.
he was determined.
Yeah,
that
and
he
it just
gonna
was.
do
It was.
this.
It was again.
Yeah,
It was
and he's so corrupt. You see
facade.
the money, that he's
murderers. They're
stolen
murderers.
and-
I mean,
yeah.
they just
Yeah,
they kill
it's
whoever
just-
dissent. Any kind of dissent is
Yeah.
squashed.
And there's no consequences for it. Like China. China knew about what was happening in Wuhan. They sent their people with the virus from Wuhan to Bologna because it has these big Chinese factories in Bologna. And those people died by the droves.
Really?
The old men, and you know how they
Yeah.
love the Italians love the grandparents.
Yeah.
They had to send them home.
Well, I
Some of the
remember in
doctors and
Italy-
nurses killed themselves because they were so distraught, sending all these older men and women to die
Home
at
to
home.
die, yeah.
Home to die. And they were crying. They were on TV. That devastated
Italy
that
was
northern
hit so
part
bad,
of Italy
really, yeah.
because they
So-
all came. They left Wuhan
I did not
knowing
know
that virus,
I
and there's
did
no
not.
consequences to China.
No, I know because of the
Nothing
whole
has happened.
economic,
Yes.
the whole economic
Nothing.
issues. Yeah,
So when
I
you
agree.
know there's no consequences, that's when you get dictators,
Yeah.
narcissists. The first book that I read when Trump got in was the 37 psychiatrists.
Mhm.
I read that book because of course I love psychiatry,
Yeah.
inside and out, about he has no empathy. The first 5 years of his life, he had major problems. His mother was sick. His mother gave him no love. His father, of course, never gave him any
Yeah,
love. His
it's just-
father was ruthless.
Yeah.
And so you don't build a conscience.
No, he had
You
not.
have no conscience. A friend of mine married a guy, the psychiatrist said to her, don't marry him. He has no conscience. His mother and father were very rich, and they traveled around the world, and they left him with the governess. He never built a conscience, had no love
Mhm.
from this governess that was with him.
Mhm.
And he said, do not ever marry him. He's a narcissist. He has no empathy, no conscience. He will do whatever he thinks he can get away with. And then he will pretend, oh, I didn't mean it. I
I'm the
didn't mean
victim.
it."
I'm the
Yes,
victim.
yes.
Yes.
And so when they went over Trump, this was in the beginning. These 37 psychiatrists had come out with another book on it, even more dangerous.
Mhm.
But they were telling how not only is a narcissistic personality disorder,
Mhm.
he has no empathy
Mhm.
and no conscience.
I mean,
And
it's
they
so
were going
obvious
on
too.
and
I
on
mean, the
about his
statements that he makes.
personality. How would you ever put somebody like a president in? And he, in the beginning, those 4 years, he really did not have enough people in there on his side that would have let him get away with all the things he wanted. There were enough
Mhm.
people fighting him. He doesn't have them
No,
anymore.
I
And
know.
they have to take a loyalty oath, and they have to prove that they've been loyal to him all along
Yes.
in order to be in his next
That's a
government.
dictator type.
And
Yeah.
he's cutting out all these organizations. He's going to put all the people, he's going to deport them. He's going to put them in concentration camps. Did
So
you
what do
hear
you
his
think-
speeches?
What do you think if he were to become president? Because I'm very fearful of this
Oh,
idea.
we're
What
going
do
to
you
be in a
think- war.
war. Absolutely.
So
in a
well, the
war.
question is, what's going to happen in Ukraine? What's going to happen with Israel? What's going to happen in
Oh, right
terms
away,
of
he's going to let Russia have Ukraine. Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. You may as well look at Putin and North Korea and Iran. That's who he's going to be. He's going to do all the things that they want.
and what's going to happen, do you think, in Israel, with in Palestine? What do you think he's going to do about that?
Well, he's supportive of Israel now. Part of it's because of all the money that comes into
Yeah.
his pocket from the Jews.
Yeah,
and
they played.
because
They
he
played.
put
All
Jerusalem-
countries
put
played
the
two sides.
embassy in Jerusalem.
Yeah,
He did
yeah.
all that. That guy in Las Vegas with the red hair. What's his name? He gave him millions and millions of dollars to put Jerusalem, the embassy in Jerusalem.
Mhm.
Because
I
he
remember.
knew-
I remember.
Yeah. So he's got a lot of financial support from the Jews. A lot
Okay.
of the Jews. On the other hand, you've got a population of the Jewish people that are again, obviously,
Yeah.
on October 7th. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that was outrageous.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
was.
and what I don't like about these protests, though, you don't stay there and protest. I am Hamas. I am Hezbollah.
No,
I am
that's
Hamas.
not okay.
Bullshit.
No, I agree. No, I have friends
You
who are
don't know your
Muslim.
damn history.
I have
if that's
friends
what
who
you're
are
saying.
Muslim who cannot stand
Oh.
Hezbollah and cannot stand Hamas.
But
I have
those
friends
students
from
have the
all
big
over the Middle
signs
East,
out.
from Lebanon,
Yeah.
from Egypt, and
Yeah.
all over.
You
And
don't
like I
kill
said,
babies and children and all that. This is but you don't have signs. I am Hamas.
no,
we support Hamas.
we support the Palestinian
What?
people.
Yeah, the children,
Right, the
wives,
children and the people,
you know.
the 40,000 people
Yeah.
at minimum that were murdered,
Yeah,
because they were murdered.
yeah.
And Israel should not have carte blanche to murder innocent civilians.
And why did-
that's a blight on
Why
our government
did
for allowing that.
Netanyahu let Hamas have all that money coming into their
Oh,
coffers
Netanyahu
all
set this
along?
up. No,
Why
he set
did
this
he
up.
have his why and I
'Cause he
hope
wanted
I
his
hope
war.
he doesn't get away with that. All those IDF guys that were laying sleeping were slaughtered there. He knew something like this was going to happen.
They
He
do.
let
They have
Hamas
proof
get
that
away
they,
with
yeah,
all this.
absolutely,
He
absolutely.
wanted this to happen because he thought he could win over and then he could take all that territory.
Mm.
He made a big mistake.
Yeah.
But
I
this is the way he
Dad
could
had
not
said
be.
to me, I remember when I asked him about Israel and Palestine many years ago, he said to me, that's the one thing I really just don't know what's going to happen there. He says, I don't know.
Yeah.
And Dad
Right.
usually had a thought
Right.
about
Right.
many things,
Yeah.
but he said,
Well, it
I don't
depends
know
on
how
who
they're
they-
going to resolve that. I
If
don't know.
Netanyahu goes to court and goes to jail, if there's some consequences for all the things that he did.
I don't
But I don't know.
Yeah.
You got that right
Well, then
side.
how do you feel about Biden supporting Netanyahu? Because that's so right wing. His Likud party is off the charts. Biden has been supporting him. Now
Right.
he speaks verbally as if he's not. He's like, oh, you
Well,
need
right
to
now
stop
he's getting in trouble because he's not supporting
because he's
him.
not sending out the arms.
Netanyahu went on TV and said he's not giving us Netanyahu wants those huge weapons so he can kill everybody with these huge weapons. So they've
But
stopped
we've
sending
already
them.
given them money, and
Yeah.
we've already given
I know,
them
but
weapons.
at least
and we
if they're
have-
stopping it now, sending those, why the hell would you send those big bombs that can kill all these
I know,
women and
it's-
children?
it's,
You know, you
what
don't
they
do
call
that.
it?
So at least they
cluster
stop
bombs.
it.
Cluster bombs.
No, they're huge bombs. They are huge. They decimate the whole place.
But isn't
They
that-
kill everybody
isn't
that's
that
inside.
just a way to say, oh, see, I'm stopping this from happening? To
Well, you have to stop it sometime.
ameliorate the people who said you allowed all this to happen. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
the only
okay, we're
thing
not
is-
going to let this horrible big
But
war,
I'm
but
not
already,
sure-
you know what I mean?
I'm
It's
not
like
sure how
ameliorating
much-
the populace is all he's
I'm not
doing.
sure how much control he had in the beginning. He has control now by keeping those weapons away from Israel. You bomb people with those huge bombs, we're not sending you those bombs to kill women and children. No way are we
But
gonna
they've
do that.
already killed
I
some-
understand that's wrong, but the fact is, they shouldn't have been sending those big bombs to begin with, because they had to have known
Yeah.
that those bombs were going to destroy
Yeah, whole
everything,
neighborhoods,
everything,
whole,
in,
yeah.
everything in sight.
It's rubble.
You know,
You
you
might
know.
as just say, okay, Netanyahu, we give you carte blanche to salt the earth.
Yeah.
That's what that's
But the
essentially.
other thing is, Hamas is not even letting the trucks come in to give people food.
I know,
mean,
this is the thing. So how do
the
you
hell
feel?
you-
How do you feel? I
then
just
how do
don't
you
like
support Hamas
how-
or Hezbollah.
I was not alive. This is why I'm interviewing. I mean, I was alive. I was a baby, but I was not cognizant and aware, right? I mean, you said you had people throwing Molotov cocktails. I mean, this country was in, fits over the Vietnam War,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
For-
they didn't like
you know-
us because this was the beginning, and they didn't like anybody protesting against the war
Yeah.
in Vietnam. They thought, oh, that.
But
this
even
is-
toward the end, then the soldiers came home and the soldiers
Yeah.
got things thrown at them too, right? Baby killer was the whole
In the
thing.
beginning, when they did, but then there was a lot of support for everything we were
Okay.
doing.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So-
then the soldiers and everybody, because the story started coming out, what was really happening, and all the
And we have protests now.
manipulation of the American people.
And the media,
Yeah,
right?
the media,
And so the
sure.
media is
The
complicit,
media,
right?
yeah.
But so how do you
Like the
think
Pentagon Papers, unless
that?
the head of the newspaper, unless she let those out, we would have never known about what was going
Yeah,
on there.
and that which was that Bernstein?
She
Or was it?
No, she was the female head of the New York Times. What was her name? She got She was, I think, the one that Nixon said he was going to put her breast in a vice. What was her name? She was also involved a little bit at the all the president's men. They come out.
So I have a question.
But there were females that actually did a lot.
Well, Dad always said that, he thinks that women should
Yeah.
have more power in
Right.
politics because there'd be less war,
Right.
is what he feels.
Right.
But when did Uncle Bob come back from Vietnam?
Well,
Were you guys?
Bob was in the service from 60 to 68.
Okay, 60 to 68. No kidding.
Yeah.
He
60
was
to 68.
8 years. Those were height.
He was in the Marines, 60 to 68. Oh, he also.
Were you not afraid for him? Were you not?
Well, he was in the National Guard the last 2 years of our marriage.
Okay.
But, I mean, we got married 66, so he finished in 68, and then he was in National, and they weren't sending people overseas then. But what he did, just before we got married, he ended up going to Cuba on a ship. He was on the ship, Kennedy. He was on the ship, and they were told, you got your rifles, you got all your gear, you will not be coming back to the United States. You will be dead. This is World War III.
Because the Cuban Missile Crisis was way before that, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that's when he was in the Marines. That was before I met him.
Oh, I see.
He was in the Marines.
I thought you were saying at the end. I'm like,
and he was
okay.
going to Cuba.
Wow.
He never got. I could never get him to go on a cruise ship. He would not get in a boat after that.
Really?
He was so traumatized. Everybody was so traumatized. They knew they were going to die.
Wow.
They
yeah,
were
well,
told.
it was on the brink of World War. It was on the
They
brink
were
of
told this
nuclear.
is World War III we're going into. You will not be coming back.
Wow. I actually, for the first time, went to the Kennedy JFK Museum about a month ago.
In Boston?
In Boston.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
I was, I've always kind of been a fan of the Kennedys, and I think they killed them because they were peaceniks. In their hearts, they were peaceniks because they lost their brother. They lost people in war. They knew war was hell, and they knew that this was not something that you wanted to, foment around the world.
Right.
And I think that the military-industrial complex. I
Oh,
don't know.
absolutely.
Did I say?
I warned everybody about the military. He was the
And he did,
general, the
yeah,
head of it.
absolutely.
He said, "You
I
be
know,
careful of
yeah,
the
absolutely.
military complex."
His farewell speech,
Yes.
right? That was it.
Yeah.
And it was one. I've read it.
Yeah,
It's a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
You know.
yeah.
So
So,
when Uncle Bob came back, and his brothers also, you say, were in the war.
Tom was in Vietnam, and he was in Iraq, and that's where he got the burn pits.
Oh.
So he was a career soldier.
I saw he
So
was.
in Vietnam and Iraq, and
Rick's friend, I was telling you, his friend Matt worked for Raytheon, but his brother was in Serbia. He was in Iraq. He'd seen a lot, and he came back. He was not the same person. I remember him young. He died a few years ago, but I think it was just alcohol related because of what he had seen.
yeah.
But he had said to me at one point, and he was not the same person. I'm telling you, this was a man who had his act together. He had seen so much, and so much duplicity in our government during those wars and all the things that were going on, right?
Right.
And he'd seen a lot of bad things. I think he might have been also in. Anyway, so he had said that we were paying the Taliban to use their roads. We were funding the Taliban
Sure.
the whole time we were in
Oh, it was ruthless.
Afghanistan.
What was going on, yeah.
and Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
The whole time we've been funding the Taliban, and they're getting their weapons. I mean, and then I don't understand. We were how long? It's 20 years
Oh yeah, absolutely.
of
20 years.
blood and death, and also our treasure, right?
Yeah.
It just seems to me that somehow.
Well, the post-traumatic stress you're talking about with your friend, here's an example. Tom, who was a career soldier in Vietnam and Iraq, he was 57 years old when he was in Iraq, and then he was there for 2 years, and then he retired from
He was a
from the
major.
service.
Major was. his friend's brother.
Oh.
His best
So
friend's
anyway, Tom's birthday's on July 4th. So I called him on his birthday. And I said, "Hi Tom, how you doing? Happy birthday." I said, "Are you going to the fireworks with your daughter and your granddaughter?" He lives in Colorado. And he said, "No." He said, "Oh no." He said, "I closed the door, closed the windows, closed the shades, put earphones on my ears, and I relived the war. I tried not to do this, but it's so frightening from the sound of the fireworks."
Yeah.
Because when he was in Iraq, because he was 57 years old, he wasn't an officer when he went in. He became a sergeant,
Yeah.
corporal or something. I think Bob was a corporal too. He would have to go into the tanks that had been blown up by IEDs, and Tom had been blown up through IEDs. He had 100 operations, but he wasn't disabled the rest of his life except post-traumatic stress. He would have to go in and pick up the parts of the bodies in the tanks that had been blown up by these
This is the
IEDs.
thing.
Now you don't ever get over something
No,
like that.
I can't even.
You know, it's just
I can't.
awful. Awful.
This is the thing, is that I don't think, somehow there's this disconnect between the general society and what war is really like.
Yeah,
You know, like if more Americans realized
yeah,
the horror of it.
yeah. Like he was so upset when Trump, you remember when the Kurds fought with us against Turkey? Remember when they fought
Yep,
with us after
yep.
Turkey? And Trump left them.
I
and
do
took
remember.
took our army out.
Yep.
They were all killed.
Yep, I do
And
remember.
when they had worked side by
Oh,
side,
I
they
know.
were the
I
ones
was
being
so
killed.
upset.
And he moved it, and Tom was like, "What the hell are they
Well,
doing?"
basically, we're hypocrites. We basically say we're going to be there and support you, and
And
then we
they
just
didn't.
pull right
Just
out
pull right
repeatedly.
out.
So why would any country or any
Yeah,
faction
trust
within
us.
a country trust us?
They
And
won't
that's
trust us.
essentially basically
He just
what's
pulled them
yeah,
right out.
exactly.
And
And then,
every-
what about
there
the
was no
Afghan? And
consequences
also
for
no
that.
consequences.
People
And
don't even talk about it anymore.
but look at
Yeah.
Afghanistan. Look at
Yeah.
the mess that we
But
did
Trump
that.
signed that before Biden
I
got
know
in.
that. I know
he
that.
signed that we had to get out. Trump had no choice on that. I mean, Biden had no
I
choice
know.
because Trump signed
I
that.
know. I know.
Now the way they got out was
No,
ridiculous.
But
You know,
but
but-
again, we've let these people down where we
Yeah.
said we would be there for them,
Even
and this is the
interpreters.
reputation. This is the reputation we're getting.
Even
right?
those interpreters.
So
they
why
got
would they
killed.
trust us?
No, they
This
don't trust us.
Yeah, this
There's
is
none
this
of the
is,
countries that trust us now, especially after he stole all the secrets.
yeah. I
And
know.
he's
I
getting
know
away
as you're
with it.
saying. I
Getting
just
away with nuclear secrets, all their plans, and not only that, it's their spies, the names of their spies.
yes, in particular, like and then
all
so
those
that
people could be killed.
so they
from all
can it
these
doesn't
countries.
it doesn't matter
Yeah.
matter to him at
So
all.
why
That's
would they-
lacking. That's because there's no empathy. It's
Why
just a
would
power.
they ever trust? And when you can say, standing where Kelly's son is dead in the grave in Arlington, and stand there and say, why would anyone want to be like that? Those
He's
are
so
suckers.
stupid. Those are suckers. Yeah, but
Yeah.
all these military people are supporting because he's a
I
demagogue.
don't
He's a
understand
demagogue.
that.
Why is it that Americans are so easy to fall for
I
demagogues?
don't understand
mean-
that. Well,
I mean-
Tom's not. Tom was very upset at that.
I know.
You don't call them, all
of
his
course
friends
not.
that died, you call them weaklings and
Yeah, well, he was-
suckers and...
I think he was referring to McCarthy, not
He was standing
what
with
was his
Kelly,
name? Not
John
McCarthy.
Kelly.
McCain. We were talking about McCarthy earlier.
Oh,
McCain.
McCain. Oh,
John
yeah.
McCain.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was trying to say that John McCain was
Yeah.
a loser because
Yeah.
he was a prisoner of
Yeah,
war.
5
and-
years, and he stayed in there. He could have gotten out because his father was a big admiral. He could have gotten out, and he said, no, I will stay there and be tortured. I will, and they tortured him more.
Yeah.
And that's why he couldn't move
Yeah,
his
he couldn't
arms
move his
after
arms.
that.
I know. I
And
remember.
he got
looking at
away
the
with
pictures.
saying that. That's why I was so glad when
McCain was
went.
like this,
Like,
thumbs
stick
down,
up your
thumbs
ass.
down. Yeah,
That
exactly.
was the best thing I ever
Yeah.
saw.
And
You
then
know,
he was
but-
he was dying of cancer. Something
Yeah.
was he was
Yeah,
dying.
and he
yeah,
came
still,
in,
he came in to
just
do
keep
it.
going, went like
yeah,
that.
I just
Yeah, that was a great thing they did. And
I don't know. I
but
just
to stand in front of John Kelly whose son is there in the grave and say these are suckers.
So, but I don't
What the
understand,
hell?
like, what do you think? What do you think? That this,
Why the
we
military
went through the Vietnam War, and now we're going through all this, and I just, what do you think is going to happen? And we're going to have to end it to this, because I can only type
I'm
so,
really
I can
worried
only
we're
type
going
so
to go
much.
into a nuclear war. I am really, of all the things through all the years that we've been through, never worried really about a nuclear war. This is a very big possibility. And, you know, when
Whether
I
or
see,
not it's Biden, or whether or not it's Trump,
yeah,
or it doesn't
yeah,
matter,
very
does
big
it matter?
Well, yeah, Trump, I think, we're definitely going to get into a nuclear war.
Do you think
I
we'll-
think Biden's going to try to do what he can with NATO. I think we may end up with boots on the ground. It depends on how many. There's 50 countries that are supporting this whole effort. So 50 countries, but now in Europe they're starting to move to the right. You know, they voted in so many right
Before World War
legislators.
II, we started getting
Yeah.
a lot of right,
Yeah.
moving to the right, and here we
Right.
are again.
Yes.
You'd
that's
think we would
what's
learn from the
worrisome.
past, but we're not.
That's
It's
why-
happening all over the world
Why
again.
Rachel's you have to
Orban,
know that history.
Right? Yeah, I know.
Really get to read that history because we are repeating that history.
We had Bolsonaro in Brazil. We
Yeah.
had Orban in Hungary.
We are repeating that history. And we didn't have the nuclear weapons
No,
then.
it's done, yeah.
We are repeating a history with nuclear weapons in many dangerous countries.
And it seems
We're
to me
talking about
Khrushchev
North Korea.
was not like the same. Khrushchev was not
No,
kind of
not-
like Putin.
No,
he had
no, absolutely, he's not ruthless.
no,
like
he's
Putin.
not
No,
ruthless.
no.
Like Putin is just.
And you got that crazy North Korean
yeah,
who Trump's in love with. He sent me love letters. What the heck?
yeah.
How
I
do
don't
people
I don't know.
tolerate that?
There's something that I just don't understand about the American people when I see how many people support Trump. And this is, we live in Massachusetts,
Right.
and yet this is it's really scary. Like, you know, somehow the Democrats are not as supportive of Biden, who I see why. I mean, he is really old. I feel like we're getting forced to have
Yes, he
both
is.
of these two.
And I definitely think he has a neurological disorder. He's got Parkinson's. It doesn't mean his mind is going with Parkinson's. I mean, bothers
Yes,
him.
it can still
Yeah.
be, yeah.
So, and he does have the wisdom. And he is probably going to end up in a wheelchair. But FDR was in a wheelchair.
I
They
was
got a
thinking about
governor who I can't stand from Texas who's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So that shouldn't be it. As long as his mind is
Yeah.
okay. When you got a mind like Trump's, that's dangerous
Yes,
mind.
it's
You
a
know, doesn't know
dangerous
anything about history, and he's going to get us into a nuclear war, supporting Putin and the rest. Oh, I'm telling you, this is very, very frightening now.
I just
When
don't.
you think of how many countries have nuclear weapons, and Trump took us out of the peace accords.
I
He
know.
took us out of Iran, all the stuff. Now they're building they're within
Nuclear,
weeks.
yeah.
Within weeks of
Yeah.
a nuclear weapon.
Mm.
So, I mean, really, you list all these things that he let happen. He took us out of a peace accord. He took us out of all this stuff with Iran.
For some reason, I have this like feeling like, and this sounds conspiratorial, but there are other powers that be. Like we have the
Mhm.
Congress and we have the Supreme Court
Right.
that are complicit also in allowing
And-
Trump to be in power and to have. I don't know. It just
Because
it
they're
seems to
thinking
me
of the
like
here and now. They're not thinking for their children and grandchildren. They're thinking about for themselves, their money,
and their political game.
their political gain, and so that they don't get caught like Robert's wife doesn't get caught.
Right.
You don't see that on the news all
No.
the time. You only because I watch so much news,
Mhm.
all the different stations, I could see that. And I thought, why don't they repeat that? Why don't they investigate Robert's wife and all this money that she's making?
Because they're above the law.
Right, and
They're
they're
above
not going to do it. And so there's no consequences. So they see themselves getting away with this over and over and over. Why not continue? You're making lots of money on this.
You know, I'm worried about this
Yeah.
country and our
Yeah.
future, and I don't know. Do you think we'll pull through it? Do you think we'll get through this?
When we go into a nuclear war, we won't. Let me tell you, when they prepare us on what we're going to have to treat for nuclear war. All you have to do is look. Hiroshima, Monomor. I saw that in 1960, it must have been, in California. They showed that movie.
Hiroshima, Mon Amour, my love.
Hiroshima, my love. It
Yeah.
was about them dropping the bombs on Japan and Nagasaki, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and showing the people and their skin just coming off of their arms and their face and their eyeballs coming. I am telling you, I was so shocked. And I'd already been in nursing, I'd already been in LPN.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. And they are preparing us because as nurses, we're going to have to be treating, if anybody survives, if we even survive, we have to be treating these people, the few that are going to survive, if any.
So
You
we're
know,
in a worse position than we were in Vietnam.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Because
I'm gonna stop it at that.
Yes,
Is that okay?
now so many countries have the nuclear weapons now.